So my hair's kind of a mess right now, but whatever. Alright, so I got the question, and I don't remember where this was from. Looks like the sun's starting to come up. Didn't want to shine on my face. Yeah, about the Lutherans and the Anglicans. More specifically, the Anglo Catholics. About what do I think of them and their proximity to orthodoxy? Well, they came about after the split. I know they still see their own apostolic succession, although they broke from the Roman Catholic Church. I think Canterbury might have a case, although they did fall after Henry VIII, when I think it was Edward, the boy king, his sickly son, came to power when he was too young, and basically the bishops were kind of, I don't want to say running roughshod over him, but they were running roughshod over him. They were kind of manipulating him to this very cold, Calvinist, iconoclastic way of approaching the church and everything, and it was creepy, and that's the part where you get the Presbyterians from, this kind of strange thing, which that had been brewing in England for a while. The people wanting to read the text in their own language, which is a very Orthodox desire, and wanting to have the service in their own language, which again is another Orthodox desire, or Orthodox sentiment at least. That's why when I first read Things Against Jan Hughes, or John Hus, or however you pronounce it, Jan Hughes, at least what I had read, what I remember from probably about 8-10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, maybe, he sounded very Orthodox to me. His desires of wanting language and liturgy in their own tongue, and the things that he combated. Now, he probably said more heretical things. I'm not going to say, oh, he's a great guy and he should be a saint or anything. But that didn't happen there. He was in Czechoslovakia, I think. I don't know much about Savonarola either, or really the pre-Reformation people that got killed. But Lutherans, I don't know, but their practice is very similar. I mean, they respect baptism, they hold to their baptism, they hold to the Eucharist. And I'm not including the modern-day Episcopalians, but there still are Anglicans out there. EMEA, to some extent, is actually closer to old Anglicanism than the Episcopal Church of God. What is it? Akuza, Episcopal Church of the United States. I almost said Kapuza, the Communist Party of the United States of America, but the Akuza, very liberal, and EMEA, Anglican Mission America, is based out of I think Jos, Nigeria. That's where their bishop sits, and there's another one that sits in the Philippines. But the Lutherans, I think the Missouri Synod ones there, from what I know of them, they too hold to the Eucharist and the liturgy, and have some knowledge of church history, at least. It's very minimal, and I think only the priests and stuff like that read the Polycarp and the Didache, which I think is terrible. Ignatius and Irenaeus. I think the Didache should be plastered on the walls of everywhere, if anything. But I have one kind of gnawing problem with them. Well, the most recent gnawing problem. I want to say one. Is there's this Jonathan Fisk character on here who's supposedly a Lutheran priest, right? Do the Lutherans have priests? I don't know. I know the Anglicans do. Good for them. But this Lutheran priest, pastor, minister, preacher character who has his own church or whatever, I get, apparently. And Lutheran satire endorses this guy, as a good, and their how a father should act. He's saying, yeah, I'm watching Jonathan Fish before I go to the mass or whatever they call their thing. I don't even think they call it liturgy. It's just called church. But why could I answer me, the lonely wretch that I am? I'm not lonely. I've got very good family and many good friends and many good people on here. Why could I answer a question about the Bible? I mean, the Westerners are so, the Protestants of all stripe, of Lutheran, Anglican. Some people don't include Anglicans with Protestants. Some people don't include Lutherans with Protestants. Some people only say, well, the Reformed or Protestants, and we're not. And I consider all the breakoffs of the Roman Catholic Church Protestant because they are all protesting the Catholic Church, or did at one point. Why could I answer? They're all big about the Bible. Oh, the Bible, and the Scriptures outweigh tradition, and as if there's a conflict with tradition and Scripture, as if Scripture isn't a part of tradition. Why could I answer a question about the Bible better than he could? That's very shocking to me. Another thing is they're buying into scholasticism, and you claim the Roman Catholic Church went corrupt, right? But you still buy into the Filioque. Augustine, I can see Augustine for the West. Okay, I can actually, as much damage as that does, and as much I think Augustine almost people buying into his ideas as if they're dogmatic, or as if he can explain things better than anybody else can, or as if we should weigh his views more than anybody else's, and his creepy worldview, and original sin and all that. I could almost concede that to the West of being something peculiar, still really pointing to heresy, but almost to the point. But if you kind of said, okay, well, his original sin thing kind of goes in total depravity, but we're not going to buy all that. But you have the Filioque, you have Augustine, but then they take Anselm, and I think Anselm is unexcusable. Because if you're going to take Anselm, why don't you take Aquinas? I think the Anglo Catholics, but the thing is, I'm not going to say these people aren't Christian. I'm not going to say they're not part of the church. What remnant of the church in the West remains? Well, I'm not even going to say the Roman Catholic Church. There aren't actually parishes, or even individuals, and maybe possibly parishes that aren't actually truly part of the church in a mystical sense. I would never pressure a Catholic to say, oh, well, you need to come to Orthodoxy. The doors are open, and I say, welcome, brother. You come in, water's fine. But I'm not going to pressure a Roman Catholic to become Orthodox. They still have many beautiful things in the Western tradition that are in a Roman tradition that aren't in the East. For a very long time, it was Thecla that resided with Antioch, with Paul and Thecla, and other places eventually got it. It's fine. So, of these remnants of the church, are they in the Lutherans or the Anglicans or the Catholics? I would say I don't know, but I'd be very cautious, and I'd always be very rapidly and very quickly to say they're probably part of the church. I can't say they are, but I would never, I don't want to, say, oh, well, they're not, because I can't do that. I have no right to do that, no authority or power to do that, and nobody does. It's up to Christ. Now, as for the preachers and stuff like this, and their priests, well, you can say, well, they're trying to stay in there to move these people, and this is what they came into and they grew up as and what they were, so they might have an obligation to their people. Then again, somebody could say, well, you've got to actually know you have to actually be part of the church to bring people into the church, so if they know they're wrong, then, and there have been cases where churches actually, the priests have looked into it and into orthodoxy, and the church turned. Now, I think that it should be very cautious when they do this, so as not to drag in any other Augustinianism or Anselmism or Aquinism, which many times it does, or misunderstanding who the church is and who runs the church, or trying to look at Rome and say, oh, well, what would a better version of Roman Catholicism be, and then trying to make the ecumenical patriarch of the Pope. No, we're not a better version of Roman Catholicism. We are Roman Catholicism, to speak bluntly. We are the ancient church that doesn't change. So I would wonder why. I mean, I still haven't seen or heard a Protestant of any stripe or color, Anglican, Lutheran, whatever, speak with as much wisdom and love and patience and even the not just a sappy type of patience of like, oh, well, not like a Deepak Chopra, but of a true man with the Spirit of God, like Archbishop Lazar. And I think even the people who don't like him in the Orthodox Church, would have to say that he's got more of the Spirit in his pinky finger than these other leaders of these factions and segments and sectarianism. I mean, that's what Protestant basically is sectarianism. That's Protestantism for you. Oh, we don't like what this guy says, so we're going to break off and start our own church. Okay, we don't agree with that. We're going to break off and start our own church. Or we believe exactly what you preach, but I want to be in charge, so I'm going to start my own church. Or I believe exactly what you say, but don't get along with you, so I'm going to start my own church. I've seen this happen. This actually happened. I went to a church where this happened. And somebody wanted to be the boss, and they had minor disagreements about just, like, I don't know how people would interpret clerical, but just like the minute ways of running the church, or what songs were to be played, not even the type of music, and not even whether they have instruments or anything like that, because they all had instruments. And they basically walked down the street and started their own church, split the congregation, and then it happened again. And after 5 years, did anybody need to really say, okay, well, we were wrong, let's combine all the congregations, and we're going to step down from being leader, and we're going to leave the original person as the leader? No. They all recognized each other. They all came under EMEA. And now you have 3 priests, 2 of them factions, and it was actually one woman who actually started the divide, and she's running the church by proxy, with basically a titular head as the priest of the congregation. So she's kind of like the hand in the glove, or the person with the marionette puppet. And I find that very creepy, and that's why I'm not for royal court remaining with its status of bishops and everything, it should have to come back under Russia. But for all that being said, Protestants, I do have hope and feel some I don't know what the word would be, but I'm glad to see them recognizing baptism in the Eucharist and not just writing it off as something to show God that you are loyal, or an outward sign of an inward change, or any of this nonsense that was cooked up less than 200 years ago. For the most part, yes, some things can go back to Zwingli and Calvin, but for a lot of the things like a rapture, or the Lord laid it on my heart, or which I hadn't even really heard that until I mean, I heard it from people, but I kind of didn't notice it. I just thought it was their quirky thing. But then on YouTube, I started hearing this type of, I mean, basically blasphemy, and it just, so you're, I mean, and I've heard people describe this. So your own conscience, your own desires, is God called you to do that, or He laid it on your heart. People moving to southern France to become missionaries, paid by 6 different churches, to just be there and just talk about God with people. That's what every Christian is called to do everywhere at all times. Are you going to Haiti? Are you going to, Congo or Rwanda? Or are you going to, Vietnam? Or what uneducated Christian country, poverty-stricken Christian country are you going to build up, infrastructure, clean water, irrigation? Are you being trained in medicine? Or what unchristian country are you going there to spread the news? Because, I mean, let's face it, the Protestants have proselytizing. Their name almost sounds like proselytizing. I almost say proselytizing. But no, they were going to France, a country totally informed about Western Christianity, to go spread a evangelical, sloshy, arrogant, crooked form of Christianity that does nothing but manufacture atheists. Sometimes people can actually convert to Christianity, but I don't think they actually stay in evangelicalism. And to live in southern France, to live the good life, while they churn out babies and can be arrogant, snobby idiots in southern France, and just maybe get Catholics to turn into evangelicals. It's like saying, I want to Christianize Constantinople by bringing Islam there. It's already there, and it's Islam. It's not Christianity. So these are some of the problems I have with the West. But again, somebody says, hey, I'm going to the Anglican Church, or the Lutheran Church. I hold to my baptism as a sign of my salvation, and the Eucharist as a sign of my salvation and the forgiveness of sins, which I don't even know if they hold to that. And I believe the liturgy should be unchanged, which again would be a huge problem in that, because they use guitars and instruments, and they use modern hymns, and their liturgy isn't really a liturgy. Just to hear those things, that they hold to baptism and the Eucharist, and they have a form of liturgy that, I don't know, probably like 100 years old, if that, but I'm still happy to hear that. And I don't doubt that there are Anglo Catholics that are better Christians than me. That's fine, or better people than me even. I don't know if I should say better Christians, but better people than me. Because I don't attribute really anything of my Christianity to me. It's God. And I suck at responding to God. Thank God, God is a good God. But yeah. So for the Lutherans and the Anglicans, something so obvious for orthodoxy, like, well, why do you pick and choose between, the commandments in the Old Testament or stuff like that? It should be readily apparent to any Orthodox Christian to say, no, knock that off. We don't go by that. We have the clearest message. We have the one that Christ came. And it's not about rules or regulations. It's about the reiteration. I mean, it's abundantly clear when you read the Old Testament, or when you read Exodus, that you have the first 10 laws, which and this is just me looking back at it now, not anything else, but this is my view on. You look at the 10 commandments; those are the commandments given by God, right? With no punishments. They're mostly commandments in the negative. Thou shalt not. There are some positive ones. The first 3 are positives, but then, I think even no. I think only one of them is. Yeah, I think only one of them is, or no, two. But to not make pagan idols, to not murder, to not commit adultery, to not steal. And then there's no punishments attached to any of that. It just tells you this is what you should do. There's no threat or anything. And then Moses ditches those, cracks those or whatever, and then the rest of them are basically explaining the law, expounding it with all these legal things and threats. So it seems like that's coming from Moses, because he talked with God, he had to interpret that and then bring it down to the people, because the people never heard that part of it. They just heard the Decalogue. But any Orthodox Christian would easily be able to say, well, no, we go by Christ. Christianity starts with Christ. Whereas fundamentalism has infected the Anglican Church. There was the Compromise, the Elizabethan Compromise. You had the Lutherans that have been totally infected by Protestantism, and all of Protestant, or even this fundamentalism, and all of Western Christianity affected by fundamentalism, whether it takes the fundamentalist line or whether it overcompensates and goes into liberalism, which many people mistake many Orthodox as being liberal, but we're not. We're just not psychopaths and arrogant. And I'm not boasting anything about myself. If I boast of God, so I boast about the church. But again, I'll put up I'll raise you an Archbishop Lazar and see you. Let's see your hand. Let's see if you have an Archbishop Lazar in there. I haven't seen one. People say Desmond Tutu. I've read his book. I don't think he believes in God. Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I thought, oh, this is a great guy. This is when I loved, I was into Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, and I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to read Desmond Tutu. And I actually gave it to somebody I worked with, and she was real big into the Baptist church, and she's much older than me, though, but we always used to talk about God, and she'd always be like, oh, because she went to the church every day. She used to, she had problems, because she grew up in, a very rough, poor ghetto area, had a bunch of kids, had problems with her husband, but a good Christian, though, and she read that, and she's like, I don't know about this guy. You like this guy? And I was just like, well, yeah, he kind of helped out with freeing people, and then just like, after I read it more, I'm like, I read it again, I'm like, yeah, I can't stick to any of this. This is pretty much atheism. He's just using Christianity as a vehicle. So you have those type of Christians in the West, and then you have the fundamentalists, and I'm happy to see the people that are in the middle. Not really in the middle, but it's kind of a false thing, but people who didn't go into those two crazy aspects. Very long video for a very simple thing to say. I'll probably make a shorter one. I believe Jos, Nigeria, that's where their bishop sits, and there's another one that sits in the Philippines. But the Lutherans, I think the Missouri Synod ones, they're, from what I know of them, they too hold to the Eucharist and the liturgy, and have some knowledge of church history, at least. It's very minimal, and I think only the priests and stuff like that read the Polycarp and the Didache, which I think is terrible. Ignatius and Irenaeus. I think the Didache should be plastered on the walls of everywhere, if anything. But I have one kind of gnawing problem with them. Well, the most recent gnawing problem. I want to say one. But Lutherans, I don't know, but their practice is very similar. I mean, they respect baptism, they hold to their baptism, they hold to the Eucharist. And I'm not including the modern-day Episcopalians, but there still are Anglicans out there. EMEA, to some extent, is actually closer to old Anglicanism than the Episcopal Church of God. What is it? ACUSA, Episcopal Church of the United States. Almost said CAPUSA, the Communist Party of the United States of America, but the ACUSA. Very liberal, and EMEA, Anglican Mission America, is based out of broke from the Roman Catholic Church. I think Canterbury might have a case, although they did fall after Henry VIII, when I think it was Edward, the boy king, his sickly son, came to power when he was too young, and basically the bishops were kind of, I want to say running roughshod over him, but they were running roughshod over him. They were kind of manipulating him to this very cold, Calvinist, iconoclastic way of approaching the church and everything, and it was creepy, and that's the part where you get the Presbyterians from, this kind of strange thing, which that had been brewing in England for a while. Soulmaker's kind of a mess right now, but whatever. All right, so I got the question, and I don't remember where this was from. Looks like the sun's starting to come up. Let's do more of a shine on my face. Yeah, about the Lutherans and the Anglicans. More specifically, the Anglo Catholics. About what do I think of them and their proximity to Orthodoxy? Well, they came about after the split. I know they still see their own apostolic succession, although they broke. People wanting to read the text in their own language, which is a very Orthodox desire, and wanting to have the service in their own language, which again is another Orthodox desire, or Orthodox sentiment at least. That's why when I first read things against Jan Hughes, or John Huss, or however you pronounce it, Jan Hughes, at least what I had read, what I remember from probably about 8-10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, maybe, he sounded very Orthodox to me. His desires of wanting the language and liturgy in their own tongue, and the things that he combated. Now, he probably said more heretical things. I'm not going to say, oh, he's a great guy and he should be a saint or anything. But that didn't happen there. He was in Czechoslovakia, I think. I don't know much about Savonarola either, or really the pre-Reformation people that got killed.